I'm so glad that Marv and Kathy could join us today. You know that we always tell everyone that you're the best Shine counselors there are. And we're so lucky to have you. We continue even during this time to receive notes from people about how helpful you've been, and you're such a gift always to the center. So I'm so glad that you could join us today to explain how you're operating during this time and answer questions that people have about Shine, because Medicare and questions about Medicare continue despite the circumstances we find ourselves in. Just want to remind people that we are being recorded for cable. So if you prefer not to be shown on cable, make sure you turn your video off, and I'll turn it over to Marv and Kathy.
Thanks, Karen.
Take it away, Marv.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry that everybody's as we are, but we are what we are. So, as Carrie said, Kathy and I are trying to, continue providing some support as needed. So what's happening is this Laurel gets calls from people. She's basically letting us know, and then we're following up within the day, and hopefully resolving the thing. So far, there hasn't, been like a lot of issues. Many of them have been just people that are hitting that time where it's time to sign up for their Medicare. And so it's signing up for Part A and signing up for Part B. And just in the past week or so, Melinda Morley from HESCO, who we report to, sent out a note that Social Security and Medicare, now you can sign up for Part B online. So it seems like, everybody in the government's trying to do something to help, to help people that can't get into a Social Security office, don't want to venture out, don't blame them. To get what they have to get done. So what we did is we didn't know if there'd be any questions. And Debbie, were there any questions that were sent in? Where'd Debbie go?
Right here. Still nothing had been sent in ahead of time, but if anyone wants to use the chat button or raise their hand, they can ask a question now, or you can go ahead with your presentation and see if they have questions after.
Okay, so we just wanted to see if we could answer any questions that typically come up. First one that we just wanted to talk to with people is, what do we do? What do Shine counselors do? And it's just a few slides here, but in lieu of any questions, we thought we'd just review some of the things that we get involved with Medicare, some basic points. So what Kathy and I do, we volunteer. First off, we report to HESCO, which is in Sharon, and they're the ones that train through the government how to do counseling on Medicare. So when we meet with people, we have absolutely no incentive or compensation or anything for anything we recommend. We're simply people that got some training and trying to help our fellow beneficiaries navigate health insurance in Medicare. We help look for coverage. We try and answer questions about eligibility, enrollment periods and benefits, and then assist with things like appeals and billing issues. And then we screen when we meet with people for public assistance programs. If somebody is entitled to something, then we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to access those programs, like Mass Health and others. Some of the questions that have been arising, or some of the points that have been arising during this whole COVID crisis, one is, as you'd expect, everybody's trying to do something, not always legal. And so scams apparently are becoming pretty common. Melinda from HESCO alerted us to one recently where somebody had made a phone call to some beneficiary and they were posing as a Shine counselor. They weren't, but they were posing as one. And they started asking questions about their stimulus payment from the government and bank account numbers and things like that. And these are not things that any Shine counselor is going to ask you, and certainly not on the phone. So I feel a little, concerned sometimes because I don't want to put people at, on caution when we call to follow up. So we're really only calling when someone contacts Laurel, or if Melinda gets routing from somewhere else within the organization, that there's a question from a Medicare beneficiary in the Walpole, town of Walpole, and that's when we'll call back and follow up. Also, Social Security and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they've issued some extended enrollment periods for Part A and D, as well as Medicare Advantage plans. So, if you missed some of your enrollment because of the national emergency, I believe they're getting a little more forgiving on the timelines for when you have to sign up. Once again, it's just a case-by-case basis. So, we have understanding of what those changes are and what the flexibilities are. So by all means, if you know somebody or if it's yourself, please speak up. We'll see if there's something that can be done. Also, there's some notes about, if you're losing your job as this crisis goes on or retiring. And I've gotten a number of calls, including from my primary care physician, who decided this was the right time now to retire. And so, they were interested in making sure that, COBRA, and was COBRA legitimate for ongoing health insurance or not? And, things like COBRA are not always credible coverage going forward. So it's not complete coverage. So there's some things to be aware of. Don't just assume that in retiring, everything's perfectly covered. The last point that, I think we've seen in the news and in papers and stuff too, is with regard to telehealth and the increased use of telehealth, for which CMS certainly hopes it's going to stay after the crisis comes and passes someday. They still want to see people continue this telehealth because it's been very helpful for people. However, some of these charges don't all get covered. Audio and video are two different components of telehealth, when you talk to your doc and things like that. So make sure you check your policies and stuff like that to ensure that everything's being covered. If you get any surprise bills.
Marv, I'm going to just step in right here. We've had this experience with my husband with a conference call with his doctor. We were driving in our car when the call came in. He answered it, and the doctor's office asked where he was. And he said, well, I'm in my car. And she said, no, are you in the state of Massachusetts? And he said, yes. She said, because we cannot bill if you are outside of the state of Massachusetts. The insurance will not cover it if you're outside the state of Massachusetts when they make the call.
Right. Good to know. Has anyone else had any other experiences with telehealth while this has all gone on that maybe they never had before? No one? It's interesting. As it turns out, anecdotally, my son works for one of the telehealth companies. And he told me that they had been working for, better part of months before the COVID thing happened, trying to enroll the California Association of Physicians in telehealth services. And they couldn't even get a phone call through. They wouldn't answer them. When this COVID thing started to happen and everybody went to telehealth, he said within a week, they were enrolling all the physicians in California on their services. So it certainly has made a change. So we wanted to take questions anybody may have, and then if there are none, I've got a few more slides, just some basic points about Medicare. So let's just pause right here and see if anybody's got any questions for Kathy or myself, or not sure if Melinda's been able to get onto the call.
Marv, let me ask you, how does one go about being able to get Medicare and Medicaid? I mean, like, I'm seeing like a lot of advertising, and I caught up one of the advertising numbers that interest me because they're advertising free eyeglasses, free hearing aids, and I have both. And then the guy says to me, well, you have to have Medicare and Medicaid. Then he tells me that Medicare is going to cost me like $144 a month.
Yeah.
So Jerry, are you not on Medicare now?
No, I'm not. I'm under my wife's plan for right now.
Okay,
How
so
old are you?
Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
and are you not over 65 yet?
I'm 74.
Marv, this should not probably be answered on a public forum. There's just a quick
Right.
phone call, a one-on-one with Jerry to get the whole situation.
All right.
Okay, good question though. Any other questions anyone has? If not, then, we just have a few slides, I think 4 or 5 slides that Kathy and I had just to kind of reiterate some basic points. Like, everybody at this point that's on Medicare has their Medicare card, looks something like this with the start date for Part A and start date for Part B. And these Medicare numbers, if you remember years gone by, they're different. Used to use Social Security numbers, but for security purposes, they don't anymore. These are completely random numbers. There is no pattern to where these numbers come up. But just so you're aware, that's what they are. And you're going to need this for all the information, such as signing up for supplemental insurance, or if you opt instead to get an Advantage plan and your Part D as well, certainly. And for eligibility, people over 65 are entitled to Social Security and paid Medicare tax people over 65 that are entitled to Social Security and have paid Medicare tax, or spouse of somebody who qualifies are able to access Medicare. Under 65, people that are entitled are ones under Social Security disability insurance. For more than 24 months after that, it flips over to Medicare. So, there's some basic criteria, if you will, for people that become eligible for Medicare. But 65 is the magic age. Once you hit there, you become eligible pretty much. And underneath there, it would be if you got other sorts of disability entitlement. There are several parts to Medicare, and this gets like really confusing. When Kathy and I had done Medicare 101 and we started meeting with people, it became apparent how confusing this all gets. Part A is generally free in most cases. We don't pay for this, and that's hospital insurance. That's sort of the room and board if you're hospitalized. Part B is medical insurance. That's physician services. That's durable medical equipment. That's glucose monitors and testing supplies. It's a laboratory, radiology. It's not pharmaceuticals and it's not inpatient. It's pretty much everything else.
There is a charge for that when you choose Part B.
Right. There is a premium for Part B, unlike Part A. Now, there's also deductibles with some of these things. Part A has a deductible. Part B has a deductible associated with it. Different numbers, different criteria, different reasons. But suffice to say, there's a premium on B and there's deductibles on both. Part D, jumping to the far right, is your prescription coverage. This can be completely separate from the Part B carrier that you may have. Other than Medicare, you probably have some form of a supplemental policy that fills in the gaps for Part B insurance and the deductibles in Part A. So Part D, it can be a separate insurance company completely. Separate premiums, separate criteria, separate drug coverage, separate tiers, formularies, and all that. And right now, there's like 26 different plans in Massachusetts. So we spend a lot of our time helping beneficiaries figure out which is really the best plan under Part D based on the meds they're taking. And it can be dramatically different. Part C is what they call Advantage plans. And Jerry, probably part of the answer to your question was when you saw some advertisements for policies that cover all sorts of things, in addition to just coverage like glasses and all that. Many times these are Part C plans, which are Advantage. Those are the ones that Joe Namath usually advertises on TV. And this wraps up the A and wraps up the B and wraps up the D. May add some other services as well. But if you have Part C, this replaces your Part A, it replaces your Part B, and replaces your Part D. So very confusing, and people can spend a lot of money for insurance they don't need unless they really understand what they're buying, and that's a lot of what Kathy and I spend our time with, explaining to people. Any questions about this? It's the most confusing part of everything, quite honestly. So the original Medicare, they call it, Part A and B, this is what we'd mentioned. Together, these cover a range of inpatient, outpatient, home care services, but they're not created to be your sole coverage because there are gaps. Aside from the premiums, there's, as you can see, co-pays and co-insurance, generally about 20%. There's also these deductibles. So what happens with all of this is people will sign up for A, they'll sign up for B, they'll sign up for D, and then generally we help them look at some supplemental insurance that fills in that 20% gap. There's something else to be aware of at the bottom of this, the last bullet. You can see income-related Medicare adjustment, or IRMA. This is really tricky. A lot of people don't even realize this until they're signing up for Medicare, but the Part B premium and the premium for Part D can be greatly increased depending on what your income was reported on your income tax a couple of years ago. If you think about it, the government gets their knowledge of your income, but they can only do it from a completed income tax report. And that would be 2 years old. So somebody that's just retiring now, but made a really good salary a couple of years ago, even though now they're retired and their income's going to drop off, the cost for their premium for Part B could be greatly escalated because of this income-related Medicare adjustment based on what their income was 2 years ago. There are ways to appeal this, and when Kathy and I meet with people that are new to Medicare that are just retiring, we'll oftentimes ask them, you know, where that fits, because if their income is significant, and that's, you know, joint income as reported in their income tax, it can get very pricey. So this could be an awful lot of money depending on what they were making before. So as we've mentioned, supplementing Medicare gets done in a few ways. There's original Medicare, which was that Part A and B, plus we sign up for Part D, which is a standalone pharmacy plan, and then Medigap, which fills in the gaps that are left in Part A and Part B. Or people replace all that with going with the Joe Namath route and getting a Medicare Advantage plan. So these are generally a little bit more restrictive than original Medicare. The networks of physicians that you can see and things like that, generally a little bit more restrictive. So it's important to know that, you know, this is what you're getting. Premiums will oftentimes be lower, but there'll also be co-pays when you go to see the doctor. So these are two distinctly different ways to get your Medicare coverage. And it's really a matter of customizing what your needs are with what you can afford to pay, what you want to pay to get the best protection for you. And this is really what Kathy and I love to spend a lot of our time working with our beneficiary friends and colleagues. So. And this is just a graphic, last slide, I believe, that explains some of those differences between the Medigap model that we were just talking about and the Advantage method. Higher monthly premium, but no copays when you use original Medicare with supplemental insurance. And this is when you hear people typically say Medicare, Medex Bronze, Medex Sapphire, Medex Core. Those are supplemental policies. Versus Medicare Advantage, where generally the premiums are lower, but because of the copays, it can cost you a lot more money in the end. Freedom to choose your doctors versus a generally restricted network with the Advantage plan. There are no referrals necessary with the original Medicare, but there may be referrals needed for specialists under an Advantage plan. Routine services like vision and hearing are not covered routinely, but you can buy riders to cover them when you're using original Medicare. And extra benefits such as vision, hearing, fitness, et cetera, are typically included in these Medicare Advantage plans. And the last is where it's covered. If you travel, if you live out of the area, if you're looking for emergency services outside of the area, Advantage plans may not be the best thing for you, whereas the original Medicare, they're typically covered anywhere you travel in or outside the United States. So that's just a few reminder slides we had put together for you. Kathy, anything just to kind of highlight here that I didn't hit.
I actually just wanted to go back and stress on the Part A and the B, that there are, on the Part A, there could be multiple $1,408 deductibles during the course of a calendar year. If somebody is chronically ill and in and out of the hospital, multiple times they can hit that deductible. And that on Part A, and on Part B, it's just a one-time annual thing, so it's not recurring. Just wanted to clarify that.
And this is what's difficult here is the original Medicare. It's pretty predictable. You're budgeting for healthcare. It's the Social Security premium, the premium for your supplemental insurance, then your Part D. End of story. On the other hand, when you look at the Advantage plans, it's the premium cost, predictable, but you really don't know how often you'll go for services. And every time you do, you'll get some sort of a copay. So it's a little bit more difficult to project the cost, but those Advantage plans typically cap the total number of dollars you'd have to pay during the course of the year, which is a good thing. But comparing the two, it really is a balance sheet. You want to project your costs with one versus the other. Both are great coverage, but it's a matter of how you want to pay it over time and what sort of vulnerability you want to leave yourself open for cost for your health insurance.
In addition, what we've gone through is pretty much just general Medicare insurance. This does not, we haven't even touched into the public benefit realm for people who qualify for mass health, for senior buy-ins, for frail elder waivers. That could just take another whole Zoom meeting and before you even got in. And it's so individualized that there's really no one size fits all for that kind of conversation.
So a lot of stuff going on with Medicare. And I guess one thing I hear from everybody we meet with about every single problem, big or small, is, oh my God, this is really confusing. And I think what happens with it is, for most of our career, we work somewhere and our employer tells us every year, this is going to be Blue Cross this year, or it's going to be Cigna, or whatever it is, it's going to be Tufts, and you don't have a whole lot of choices. Your employer tells you what it is because they've done all the shopping, because they pay a big portion of it. And then all of a sudden we retire or we leave work, and no longer do you have an employer with a whole department doing all that work. You got to figure it out all for yourself. So not saying that, Kathy and I or any of the people that do Shine can, replace all of that horsepower, but we're here to try and help guide you and direct you, and to make smart, business decisions on what it is that's best for you. So, by all means, just ask Laurel. And even though we're not going into the center, we'll try and follow up with you on the phone. It becomes a little more difficult to explain some of this stuff over the phone, but we're going to get our try to do it. So by all means, please just let Laurel know and we'll follow up.
One of the things that I would like to stress on top of that is when you're making decisions, a lot of people, we help remove the emotion of making the decision. We just deal with the facts without the emotion. One of the questions I'll always ask somebody is, how comfortable you are putting your head down on the pillow at night if you knew you had a $1,400 bill if you were to be hospitalized the next day? How can you sleep? We try to remove the emotion while they're making the decisions.
Yeah. So any other questions? Did any of this prompt anything anyone wanted to find out? Okay, that's cool. And then,
Marv and Kathy, I just wanted to say really
oh,
quick.
hey, Melinda.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good, good.
I just wanted to thank you guys so much for this free service. Since you guys have joined the Walpole Council on Aging as Shine counselors, I've seen the numbers of Walpole residents served by Shine skyrocket. So I think word has gotten out that you do a great job not only explaining Medicare, but also those public benefits, which are super complicated. So thank you guys for all your service. Really great job.
I think
Thank
that's
you,
the
Melinda.
chocolate chip cookies that Laurel
Yeah.
did.
Gluten-free though, right, Marv?
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions?
I'm typing.
Is there? Jean, will you?
Jean, yeah.
I typed it in. Is the $14.50 deductible sometimes covered by your Medigap policy?
Yeah, so indeed, if you have Medigap insurance, then that's going to be $14.50.
Depending, yeah.
So there's three types, for example, of Medigap insurance. Typically, you'll hear them say core, bronze, or sapphire. The core plan doesn't cover the $14.50. The sapphire and the bronze do.
Okay.
Once again, there's differences. The other subtle differences, you see it says $198 deductible into Part B. Well, the core doesn't cover that, and the sapphire doesn't cover that. The bronze does. So,
Okay.
you got three different flavors at three different premiums where you spend more for the greater coverage. You'd expect that. However, interestingly enough, at $198, even though you'd pay this out of pocket with the sapphire policy, so it sounds like you're paying more money, the premium is lower to a greater extent than that cost is. If you're not getting sapphire than bronze, you'll pay a lower premium that'll save you more money than you'll spend if you have to spend the $198 on your deductibles. Okay. Any other questions anyone's got? This is a great one. All right, so Deb, I guess I turn this back to you as long as I don't blow like my laptop up and your machine up.
No, that was great, Marv. I know Carrie's still on here too. We usually at this point, if there aren't any more questions, we open it up for people to chat if they want to stay on for a bit.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Stop your screen share. There we go.
I have to echo Melinda. You guys are a gift. I said it when we started. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. I had no place to go on Tuesday morning now.
My life has been impacted greatly, believe me.
Yeah, let me put it, this really sucks.
We don't even get by to the scone place because I'm not that close.
The scone place. And I never realized how much I look forward to going to Costco every Saturday. Who would have
A
thought?
lot we're missing.
I know. Melinda, are you home with all your kids? Oh, there they are.
Yeah,
There
she
they are,
is.
right by the pool. Oh, can we help?
Oh, nice. What was that address again? We're all coming over.
Yeah. Nice, nice, nice. Laurel, are you down the Cape?
She's muted.
She's muted.
You're muted.
Is that something I did?
I'm going to say that's the first time I've heard Laurel being speechless.
There. Nope.
There she is.
Hear me now?
Can hear you now. Can you
Okay.
hear me now?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? No, I'm not on the Cape. I'm in Lakeville, working from home.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, great. I miss you guys. Miss you
Yeah.
terribly.
Oh,
So,
no. Marv, what about the wedding plans?
Well, I'll tell you, this is getting from bad to worse. My daughter was supposed to be married on Memorial Day Sunday. So obviously, and interesting, they've been planning their wedding for 18 months. At the very beginning, her fiance wanted to get married way back when. She said, no, we need time to plan. So you're going to guess who's saying, I told you so right now. So that was that. So that's off. Then they scurried around and they rescheduled for Sunday of Labor Day, upcoming September 6th, but who knows? And so now we've got Plan C, and that is Friday, the day after Thanksgiving.
Oh, geez.
Which is terrible, because that means people have to come in on Thanksgiving to come for their wedding the next day, which is probably not going to happen. But even then, the venue's not sure at all what they can do, what they can't do. They had 180 people they're expecting, and, you can't fit 180 people in the same space when they're socially distanced, and half as many at a table now. And, my daughter is most upset about masks and her wedding pictures. She doesn't want to have.
Oh, jeez. What about just handing them $50, let them go buy a ladder and elope?
Well, actually, what they did is they are going to get on the 23rd, another week or so away, 2 weeks away, 23rd of June, very small ceremony, just
Okay, good.
ceremony with, you know, his parents and us, you know, my son and stuff like that. And then they'll have like a real wedding, hopefully, on Labor Day, Sunday, if that works out. If not, Thanksgiving. If not, you know, who the heck knows.
Well, I got married on the Friday after Thanksgiving and everybody showed up and I had chicken because it was the cheapest thing on the menu, even though everybody had turkey the day before.
Oh, now you got me thinking. Good idea. As the father of the bride, I like that. I was suggesting tuna sandwiches. That didn't go over.
Yeah, that's good too. Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't going over. No one liked that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the story. So yeah, it is what it is.
Oh,
Yep.
God.
You're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, they'll get married. You know, they've been living together through this whole thing, which is, I guess, a great test that, you know, they're going to do okay. I mean, they've been with each other 24/7 now for, you know, for however long we've all been, you know.
Oh, in this house, it's
just
been
a
since
matter of
March
getting
9.
married.
Yeah.
So they can do it on the Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't. We've already had a couple funerals on Zoom, which.
Oh, wow.
No.
That doesn't work either.
they're
Doesn't work. Doesn't work.
Therefore, my kids, you know, my daughter's fortunate. She had moved out of her apartment, moved into his house, I don't know, 18 months ago or something like that. So
Let
at
me
least they've
put
been
it
living
ano-
together.
let me put it another way. Last Wednesday, and they were honoring Keith Lockhart from the Boston Pops. And I've never in my life have ever seen anything like this. But they had the entire orchestra and everybody was home.
Right.
Everybody had their instruments out.
Right.
Everybody was playing the same song at the same time, and they were all on the Zoom.
Right.
I just thought that was incredibly
That's incredible.
amazing.
Yeah, that's
To be able
incredible.
to
Yeah,
be
if
able to
you've-
watch everybody at home all playing the same song as if they were all together at the Boston Pops. It was just
yeah.
amazing.
It's beautiful. I think it was Summon the Heroes or whatever it was by John Williams. And you can do it on YouTube. You can search it and watch it. It's a couple minutes, but I know, Jerry, it was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, the other one, depending on completely different type of music on YouTube, you can find, what was it, Dropkick Murphys. They were at Fenway Park live last weekend, Saturday or Friday night or something, 2.5 hours. It was phenomenal.
Well, I don't know about how anybody else is handling this, but my husband is a professional social distancer. If I have company, he always runs in the other room anyway. So if he gets interviewed by the man on the street, this is going to be the best time of his life. Nobody's coming by. My wife is home cooking 3 meals a day. Everything is perfect in his world.
That's a riot. That's a riot.
Your husband,
Yeah, it's a different way of life.
Kathy, your husband sounds like my wife. Because, like, you know, she doesn't like to be seen on the here on the Zoom, so I have to kind of like drag her in here.
Yeah.
And she's very selective as to who she'll say hello to.
Well, I'm going to wish everybody goodbye and hope to see you all soon.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Kathy.
All right.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you,
you.
Marv.
Always good to see everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. I'm going to leave too. So thank you all very much for the opportunity. Nice chatting with y'all.